Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Norwich Talk for podcast number 38. You join us after another 2-1 victory for Norwich. Yes, another one. We beat Cardiff again, I think for the second time in about 30 days. Perhaps we're going to be talking a little bit about that. We're also going to move on to a question a little bit later regarding signings and whether we think Norwich actually need to make any signings in this transfer window, as well as a preview to our game against Bristol City. Chaps, how are we?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. You?
Yeah, I'm all right. How are you, Alf? You all right?
I'm very well. I'd be better if that United Liverpool game was a bit more entertaining to watch. But
Oh, yeah, Jesus. Did you watch that, Sam, as well?
Yeah. Waste of 2 hours of my life.
Yeah, it's one of them games, isn't it, where you just hype it up massively, and it's just an absolute disappointment. But disappointment is not a feeling that we are familiar with at the moment, guys, is it? Norwich City winning again, and as I mentioned, another 2-1 win, which is kind of crazy. Goals coming from Grant Hanley and Todd Cantwell. Jordan Hugill was massively unlucky not to score. Alf, I'll come to you first. Your general thoughts on the game?
you know what? It was. I think my general thought would have to be a game of two halves. Now, I know if you've watched the preview, that's the exact same words that Sam used in his. And I don't know if you follow us on Twitter as well, you'll notice that was pretty much how it was kind of put out at the time. That the first half was like it was perfect. You couldn't really say anything wrong about it. For us to come in 2-0 up, we're not always doing that. We often go 1-0 down or 1-0 up and kind of struggle, and we're more of a second half team. So to kind of get to the break 2-0 up, taking our chances and played fantastic, there was no complaints. And then you've got the second half, which again, I'm never going to complain about a win. I think that's the really important thing here is that
You're getting
it's
pretty
never
close.
well, I guess constructive criticism is how I'd give
Yeah.
it. I just think it's that ability to kill off a game, just for my own sake. I'd love it if we smashed a team. And I think when you're 2-0 up against a Cardiff team that we made to look really poor in the first half, like we absolutely executed our game plan perfectly. We played through their press. We were unbelievable. Todd Cantwell, Kenny McLean were probably playing their best games I've seen at least this season. And then it just kind of all slowed down that second half. And, again, I don't know what you kind of boys think about this, but I just feel like that kind of, even with the red card, we still look like second best to it. And we have this almost like this mental thing where we can't take that chance to kind of really kill a game off. I mean, I remember Plaqueta come on a couple of times and, we'd go through or have a shot, and we looked like we just didn't want to score. We're just happy to settle, And look, we won the game. That's the most important thing. But I guess it's just that frustration of like, hey, let's just go and batter someone.
Yeah, I think in terms of the idea of not really being able to kill off games, I think we should probably save that for the Bristol City preview and hold on to that point until about then. Sam, the first goal, Grant Hanley, a very rare goal from a corner. I think we've said, for weeks now, for ages, that it seems about time that we started scoring from corners, taking advantage of set pieces. What did you make of the goal?
Yeah, especially Grant Hanley. He seems to get his head on every single corner, and
Mm.
invariably it goes over the bar. So it was good to see him finally scoring one. Obviously, it wasn't him that originally got onto it. I think Vrancic was probably trying to score when
Yeah.
he got onto it. But yeah, it just shows, when the best teams have goals all over the pitch, and it's sort of fitting that when Pookie's out injured, somebody who hasn't scored for in the league for like I think maybe 2 years or a bit longer um, steps up and scores. And yeah, I was really pleased for him, especially given I think we all think he probably he was due a goal and the amount of chances that have been created for him from set pieces.
Yeah, hopefully it's a sign of things to come. It was a really good flick on from Vrancic, whether it was meant to go in or whether it was sort of purposeful. Either way, it was really, really good. And Grant Hanley was there to sort of gamble. It was really poor from Cardiff. I don't know who was next to Hanley from the corner, but the hands went on the head immediately. And for Neil Harris to concede a goal like that against a team that he described as better than last season's champions, he must have been like really kicking himself, because when you play against Norwich, you've got to keep it tight, because as we see by the second goal, Norwich can play through you so easily. And with that goal, it's needlessly conceded, I'll probably say. It must have been really frustrating for him. But I want to kick us off for the second goal, that is. We're going to, for the sake of convenience, we're going to ignore Harry Wilson's chance really early in the game. But for the second goal, genuinely, the move was sublime, wasn't it? It was about 5 or 6 passes before the ball went from Daniel Barden's box to Hugel one-on-one. Now, when I watched this goal back, I tweeted this on the Norwich Talk Twitter account as well. I didn't pay attention to it. You don't really pay attention to them sort of classic Norwich City build-up moves. And for me, that's such a huge compliment of Norwich City and Daniel Farke and sort of this style that is implemented, because it's just sort of second nature to Norwich now. And when you look at a goal, you sort of expect it to be like that. But the fact we've done it is it's just a real compliment to him. And again, it's the culture that Daniel Farke has brought. And it's really nice to see that Norwich haven't lost the identity that they created in that 18-19 season. I think it was really unlucky for Hugel, Alf. Would you like to have seen him score that?
You know what? I think for the critique he gets unnecessarily, I would have loved him to tuck that away. I think what people are forgetting is that was such a good save by Smithy. You know, and it was actually.
I mean, it's straight at him. Come on.
It was, honestly, I genuinely think that was nestled in bottom left corner. I thought it was going to be a beautiful little strike. But even then, it's the ability to be in that position, take one touch at your body and get that shot off. But I think the thing is with Hugo, which we've all got to kind of understand, is there's so much more to his game. And yes, I've no doubt that Pukki is probably a better all-round player. I don't think anyone's disputing that. But he held up the ball so well and really took advantage of Joe Bennett playing as like a left back at centre back, and and bullied them, to be honest. And I'd love to see him get on the score sheet, especially scoring in back-to-back games, if you count Coventry, obviously not league, but in the cup. But it just was one of those things, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really good sort of positional awareness. And I know from myself, I won't speak for anyone else, but for myself, I sort of questioned whether he had that intelligence that Pukki has. And for me, that run is an example of he does have it. And the finish, it wasn't particularly brilliant, but also equally, as you said, it was a pretty good save. But Cantwell was there, of course. Just talking about Hugel quickly, because he had a really good game, Sam. What did you sort of make of him for the entire game?
I think it was definitely his best performance in a Norwich shirt, in my opinion. I mean, he's not had too many minutes. He must have only played 90 in 2 or 3 games, but yeah, he was really good, I thought. I still think we missed Pukki and his sort of movement, but especially given the fact that we had to hold on to a 1-goal lead, although we shouldn't have done, especially after they had the red card. But the way that the game panned out, we did have to hold on to that lead, and I thought he was really valuable. I think you said it in the last pod, Ben. That his, the only time you've ever really wanted to see him on the pitch is when we're winning and we need to hold on to a lead, and he's a really good option from that standpoint. He's a really good focal point to get it forward to. I think just to touch on that goal, sorry, I think there was so many little bits to the build-up play that you don't really notice when it's going on, and then when you look back, it's they're so important. Like when Vrancic receives the ball, which you wouldn't have seen Stiepermann coming and getting it that deep. I don't think. He just waits. He could play the pass backwards and square to Kenny McLean, but he just waits that few seconds, because Kenny McLean isn't even in the picture when he first gets the ball. Waits 2-3 seconds, sort of pulls in Vokes, creates the space for Kenny McLean, and that pass goes forward rather than sideways, which you so often see. I think Michael Bailey made that point before me, so I have to give him credit for that. I'm not claiming credit, but just those little things, and Hugo's first touch. There's just, as Norwich fans, it's like you said, Ben, we're used to those things now, but when you really look back and analyse it, it's such a good goal, and we really should be, we're privileged to watch our team play that way.
Yeah, again, it's a massive compliment to just sort of the way we play football. And when Norwich got relegated, there were fears from myself personally that Norwich could sort of regress in terms of the progression on the pitch, as well as off maybe as well. But it's really nice to see sort of Norwich, playing like their 18-19 selves, but also there's that new style, as you said, where Vrancic is dropping a bit deeper instead of Stiepermann picking the ball up, for example. And it's nice to see lessons are being learned, but also taken advantage of, which is also, it's really, really important. I said at the end of last season, lessons are there to learn. It's just a case of if we do. Evidently for me, Norwich City are. Now, I think we should move on to the second half. At half-time, by the way, Norwich had 49% possession, which is quite a rarity these days, isn't it? However, as we said, Norwich played really well. Could have had 3 or 4 in the first half. Again, in the second half, could have had another 3 or 4 as well, couldn't we? But I don't know about you, Sam. I know you, Alf. You were very nervous, sort of throughout the second half, really, even though there was a red card. But for me personally, I wasn't, and I want to start off on that point, which is I thought Norwich just looked quite comfortable. The goal from Cardiff, it was really sloppy from Grant Hanley, I think, as well as McLean. McLean got turned a little bit too easily. Hanley really weirdly didn't stick his foot out at all, which I'm not going to say he definitely would have blocked it, but equally, I think had he just poked his foot out, maybe he probably would have. Although equally, right after that, he was putting his boot back on. So I don't know if a flimsy boot has stopped him from trying to stop Joe Rules at all, which was a decent finish. I don't think there was much Dan Barden could really have done. But for the rest of the game, for me personally anyway, I thought Norwich looked pretty comfortable. Cardiff only created one big chance, as it's labelled on SofaScore, which again it was wasted. So for me, I felt pretty comfortable. But I'll turn to you first, Alfie, in terms of how you felt throughout the second half.
I think if you reflect on chance creation, I definitely agree in terms of I wasn't particularly nervous that Cardiff would be, having tons and tons of shots on our goal, or because like you said, I think there was only one chance and it was like a header from about 6-7 yards out, which went straight at Barden. I think it was more so how unnecessary it was that we were only one goal in front. I think when I look back at some of the games this season, which has come back to bite us in QPR at home, and Coventry at home, like more recently, it's 2 games against a similar opposition where you've had so many chances to just kill the game off, get that second goal lead, and it's more so the times that when these are happening, to kind of score, what was it, 65, I think it was. If it's such a crucial area, that kind of 65, 75, where it's like, look, if there isn't a goal, you can kind of rest a bit. If they score with 10 minutes left, it's not as bad in my eyes. But I think if they're scoring early in the half, that's really when you're like, look, do we now go for another one or do we sit in a dilemma? And it felt like Norwich, the players on the pitch, didn't know what was going on, because Kiefer Moore come on and Sherry Ojo come on, and Kiefer Moore absolutely dominated everything in the air. And my kind of worry or concern came from, look, all it takes is for one little flick on, one wrong bounce, and they're in the game. And we've gone from 2-0 up, playing the best football, to losing 2 points, And I think that was where kind of my nerves come, was that we didn't look like we were going to score, but we looked like we were more likely to be put on the back foot and concede.
Yeah, do you know what? I definitely agree with the nerves. And I think it's fully justified in terms of this. Before we've seen it happen, haven't we? We saw it a lot in the Premier League where Norwich would be leading at half time. And again, the momentum would just sort of randomly shift. For me, again, I'm going to maintain that I wasn't really that nervous, but I definitely get your point. Now, as fans, I say we have the privilege, we have the ability to remember other games during games because we've seen it so often, whereas being on the pitch is sort of a very different environment, isn't it, Sam? Do you think at all that the Norwich players were maybe thinking, oh God, this has happened before, is it going to happen again? Whereas obviously for fans, it very much is the case of you think about them things.
I think maybe it's probably more likely that they were thinking about how vital every game is now that we're in the position we're in. Because I don't think this season have we lost a 2-goal lead at any point this season. I don't think so.
Don't think so.
So there's most of the players won't have experienced that in this side and won't remember it if they have. So I think probably in terms of their mentality affecting the way that they played and how deep the defenders dropped and things, I think that definitely was a factor. But it's probably more being worried, what does this mean for us if we draw this game, or if we lose this lead, which could be massive for us. How much of an impact will that have on our season? They didn't know that Bournemouth were going to go on to lose to Luton. So they were probably thinking, if we end up drawing this game, it's going to be down to 2 or 3 points our lead, and it's going to open up the race again. So that probably was a factor, yeah.
Yeah, we've all played football, haven't we? Where when you're on the pitch, you don't think about them things. I think it's pretty safe to say they're definitely focused 100% on the game. And if it happens, it all happens, doesn't it? Us fans, again, we have more time to sort of reflect upon it and feel more downhearted. Whereas when you're on a football pitch, if you're having time to sort of reflect whilst you're playing on other games, then you shouldn't really be on that pitch, should you? Now, Pat got sent off in the 70th minute, which didn't really relieve that much pressure. As you said, Moore had come on, he was winning balls in the air. wasn't really doing much with it. I think you said off camera, didn't you? You said he had 3 or 4 players around them, but equally they were very short players, so it wasn't really going to make that much of a difference, was it? Now for Norwich, there were calls for substitutes, as there always is on Twitter. Poeta came on in I think the 75th, 80th minute, something like that. And he had a good 2 or 3 chances. I'm not going to say to definitely score. He probably could have scored from at least one of them. But instead of the game specifically, I want to talk a little bit about Poeta, sort of off the cuff here, because I think it's a very interesting discussion. I'll let you guys decide who goes first, by the way, on this. But with Poeta, what is it? Because quite clearly he's got the credentials to become a championship leading winger. He's got the pace. Quite evidently, he's decent at crossing. There's been flashes of brilliance on the ball, and I think he's okay at shooting, which really in the championship you don't need to be that good at shooting, do you? Because you can score from an array of chances that you'll inevitably get, especially in this Norwich team. But what is it? What's Poeta got to do to take that sort of next step? And I guess you can reference this game as well.
Do you want to go first, Sam?
Yeah, okay. I think positioning is probably his biggest flaw for me. He seems, for somebody with the amount of pace that he has, in my mind, the best strategy for him is to be on the last defender and really pin it. And that could be tactically, that could help us defensively as well. In a game where fullbacks rushing forward is so important. Having a winger like Poeta to pin them back could be really good for us, but he doesn't really seem to want to do that. He seems to want to get the ball on the halfway line and have a few touches and maybe pass the ball inside, which is fine if you're Emi Buendia, because one, that's what he's best at, and two, he doesn't have electric pace. So if he was to be on the last man, he probably wouldn't get in behind that often. Whereas Poeta is definitely the fastest player I've ever seen in a Norwich shirt, and he's never really in a position to use that, which I think is frustrating. I think he did better at it in yesterday's game, but maybe that was because Cardiff were chasing the game and that was where the space was, and he was sort of forced to play there. So I think he needs to improve on that. Maybe his end product a little bit, although he is getting closer to that. I think there was one time where he cut inside, had a shot on his right foot that was quite dangerous, and then obviously the assist in the last game against Coventry. So that's improving, but yeah, I think positioning is probably the area of his game he needs to improve the most.
Alf, Poeta, what's he got to do for you?
I think it's an abundance of things, but I don't know if all of them are specifically his own doing, if you like. I do think there is an element of which is kind of out of his control. It's just him adjusting to kind of the physicality of the league and the speed of the league. We hear this quite a lot. I know I don't want to kind of take away from what he might be doing better, but I think to be fair that the lad's not exactly too old. I don't know exactly, but 22, 23,
23 in March. Yep.
In that kind of category, he's never played in this league before. He's playing in a team where predominantly it's not necessarily aided to how he plays in terms of the balls over the top and behind. We play, especially in that kind of 3 roaming behind. A lot of the time it's like Todd Cantwell will play on the left and I'll be in the middle, then I'll be on the right. Whereas Poeta's from just how he was previously in the Polish league, he was kind of more accustomed to being that winger. And I think that, kind of tactically, he's maybe not as, and I think you mentioned there, Sam, he's not utilised as probably how he maybe should do. I think definitely in terms of his own product, from a more I think he makes some great decisions in terms of passing. I think it's when he decides to shoot. I think there was a couple of occasions where Hugo was literally standing unmarked on the edge of the box and he chose to, I think, cut inside and hit it pretty much straight at Alex Smithies. And you just wonder if he rolls that ball off, is it a different outcome? So I'd definitely say decision making is maybe one thing, but I just think a lot of it is just he just needs 6 months, 12 months to adjust. I mean, to reference a player today in Ndombele, everyone's talking about him because he's an incredible finish. If you saw it from the Spurs documentary, a player even of that caliber took him 12 months. He wanted to leave, before he kind of got used to it. And I think in an even more physical league in the Championship, it's even tougher for players. So I think just time is all he needs.
Yeah, he's a young person moving to a new country, isn't he? But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about football, aren't we? But I think he's one of them sort of crowd players, isn't he? A lot like Onel Hernandez early in his Norwich career, where, again, yeah, sometimes you'd see the safe pass. But I remember one example at Carrot. I cannot remember for the life of me who we were playing. But Hernandez got the ball. He had the crowd behind him. and you could quite clearly see that there was no option for him. The crowd was not letting him turn around and pass it back. He was only allowed to go forward and just sort of belt it, which I think Poeta needs, and he's not going to have that for a while. So I'm interested to see how Daniel Farke sort of manages to coach him. He's done a decent job so far, and as you said, he needs a run of games as well. I think he was starting to have one, wasn't he? And then he went and picked up that 2 or 3 week injury, which again, they're such inconvenient injuries because 2 or 3 weeks isn't enough to fully knock you off your stride, but it is not a major disruption. It is an annoying little minor disruption, especially to the flow of such a competitive league, such a physical league. But it is worth mentioning as well that I've not seen anyone sort of criticise Plata too heavily or not constructively. We're all very much behind him, which is nice to see because, you know, quite clearly there is a talented player there. Cardiff game, are we satisfied with that? Anything else to say?
Apart from individual praises to Todd Cantwell just off the cusp, I think, who had a fantastic game, which I've already kind of said about. That's pretty much all I've got.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Anything else, Sam?
Kenny McLean again.
Kenny
But you
McLean.
know, I go into him after every game. I avoided him purposefully in the match review because it's just too much of me going on about how great Kenny McLean is. So yeah, that's it from me.
Yeah, that's fair enough. They were both really good. Cantwell for me was better throughout the entire game. McLean was fantastic in the first half, but a lot like sort of everyone else in the yellow shirt, he sort of faded throughout the rest of the game, which is fine because we've won. Like we've won, so we can accept this, can't we? Cantwell, his work rate was absolutely sublime, which for a player who's constantly having his attitude questioned or had been constantly having his attitude questioned was really good to see, wasn't it? He could have had a good few chances, really, but equally, it's nice to see that desire. And for me, he definitely is very, very capable still. I think it's a matter of time before the goals properly flow again. I know he scored against Cardiff, of course, but again, it's just a matter of time before he starts assisting and scoring and making a few more key passes, which is really promising and really exciting. The last thing I'll say on the Cardiff game is just Max Aarons was fairly disappointing, which surprised me. I genuinely forgot he was on the pitch for most of the first half, which is a rarity, but I have absolutely no doubt that he'll be bouncing back within no time. So I think it's probably appropriate that we move on to our main question, which is, should Norwich City really be looking to make any signings? Of course, we essentially have made one, according to various sources, including the Pink and the Athletic, etc., which is Giannoulis. I'm not going to say the first name because I've not got it written down in front of me, which makes me assume I don't know how to say it. But he's a left back, which my initial thoughts on that, I've done a video sort of informing you on what we know about him. He comes with a fair bit of pedigree by championship standard, that is. So it should be quite interesting. I know the Greek fans, there was like 46 comments on the video, which is ridiculous. And they were all just saying how much they absolutely love him and that Norwich are getting a bargain and that they only are selling him because they need the money. We know how that feels, of course, don't we? It's very interesting to be taking advantage of a team like that and not actually being it. But a left back, Sam, thoughts?
Very interesting. I think it shows the amount of faith they have in players who are already there. I think Xavi Quintilla a little bit, but I expect those two to be at least until the end of the season competing for a place. I think it, in terms of a knock-on effect, it shows more about what they think of Sam McCallum, and I think they were probably expecting more. Obviously, signed him in January, last January, and then he arrived in the summer. And I watched a few of the pre-season games and was quite disappointed actually. And I think that might have been, I think maybe Webber and co felt the same, and that was why they let him go out on loan. And that's why they've brought in another left back. So I think a lot of people are saying, you know, oh well, this is the end for Quintilla. I think it maybe is more. It shows more the position that Sam McCallum is in and what they think of him. I am excited, obviously, to still see him, having seen some of the comments on the video. Um, you know, he must be at least decent to have all of that love and praise from all of those fans. So I'm excited. But yeah, it's just a shame to see sort of a young player like McCallum. It looks like that's going to be quite a significant blow to his Norwich career.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right when it comes to McCallum. I noticed him in the pre-season as well. I wouldn't say I was disappointed. I'd say it's more sort of like, oh, right, he doesn't really look that ready, whereas other performers throughout pre-season did. I know Ollie Skip being one, for example, where I was like, yeah, I'm very excited to watch him throughout the season. Alf, he comes here, Giannoulis, that is, he comes here having played in the Champions League qualifiers, played in the Europa League, played the Europa League qualifiers. How important is sort of that European experience, if at all, to a team, I'll say battling for promotion?
You know what? It's a really tough question because a lot of the, I mean, the only real other player that kind of gives me those vibes is Ricky Van Wolfswinkel coming. Aside from the position, of course, but the kind of the European player coming in who played in Europa League, etc. Because we don't really see too many players come through Norwich who have international experience or those kind of those big cups like the Champions League and Europa League. I personally think it's something which could, bump up a price if you're trying to sell a player. Whether or not that adds too much on the pitch, who knows? Because especially when you're looking like a Greek league, how hard is it to kind of get into that position? A club like PAOK, they're the only club I could probably name to you from that league. So, it's a bit like Celtic. If you play for Celtic, you're probably going to have Champions League experience. Does that mean you're a good player? We'll wait and see. I just wanted to kind of really touch on a point just from both of you to play a little bit of devil's advocate. Just on what you said about McCallum. Now, I don't know. I don't think this will be the end of McCallum. I think this just is going to allow McCallum to go out on loan and further his development. Because I think if this was really, I think this is more so to signal that we're not. I think that's personally what it is. I think it's to bed someone in because Quintia, there's either been something found or, something which is not ideal, probably to do with his injury that he had. And I think that's probably why, because at the end of the day, Javi Quintia, if he was back to full fitness, would slot in this team absolutely fine. If you took this back 2 or 3 months ago to before the Brentford game when he got injured, no one would have asked for another left back. We were pretty happy. You could recall Sam McCallum in January if you really need to, but if not, Javi Quintia is there. I think this kind of tells me they want us, like I say, get someone in who can merge with the squad. And then if we do go up, we've got a cheaper clause than if, for example, we had to renegotiate if he was only on loan for that 6 months. That's, I guess, just to play devil advocate, I think it's so McCallum can kind of further his development out.
Yeah, I think that you're definitely right. I didn't mean to. If I did, I didn't mean to say that he. I think he'll leave. It's the end from it. No, I don't think that's that at all. I think you're right. It just sort of relieves pressure off him, doesn't it? Because again, he's a young guy who sort of rose through the ranks quite quickly from non-league to actually playing professional football. And I think, it just buys him time, really, doesn't it? We know Norwich don't like to rush players. We've seen it time and time again, really, haven't we? You look at, I don't know if it's not really a Stuart Webber example, but James Maddison wasn't rushed into the first team when quite easily he could have been. And he's ended up being a really, really good player from Coventry as well. So, Sam McCallum, I don't think it's over for him at Norwich at all. With Quintia and this signing, in terms of my final thoughts, I'd probably say Quintia, he'll probably stay because Norwich, as we said, we've only got one left back, which is Quintia. I know Sorensen is fairly adequate left back, but equally, I think himself personally, as well as Daniel Farke, want to be using him properly, getting him ready for what is hopefully a Premier League season next year. And I think it will just be a case of them two battling it out, perhaps. Maybe, I don't really know. The other thing in my mind says that Quintia isn't physically fit enough to play an entire season. And if you're going up into the Premier League with a player of that quality, but getting maybe injured frequently or carrying a sort of a continuing injury, you can't run that risk, can you? We saw last season, for the Christ's sake, how when you keep playing players who aren't fully fit, for example, I know Ben Godfrey was playing through a hernia at one point. Ralph Fairman was playing through a bit of a groin injury, got injured after 20 minutes. We didn't see him again for Norwich. Well, actually, no, we saw him once, in the Cup. But you can't run the risk, can you? And for me, again, it's an example of Norwich learning lessons. Again, for this season specifically, Quintia will be a great option, and this guy will be as well, by the sounds of it. Now, we've been told that he can't defend, so he should fit in quite well at Norwich, really. But when you've got Ben Gibson to your right, which he will do, I'm sure Ben will soon whip him into place if he's, maybe wandering a little bit too far up the pitch. But equally, this guy, I'm just looking through comments here. Everyone's saying that apparently he could play for teams outside the top 5 in the Premier League. How true that is, I don't know. How authentic that is, I don't really know. But equally, for a team and for fans to love a player that much says quite a lot about him. Now, we'll move on from him. And next to me here, I've got Norwich's squad for this season, which I thought I'd assemble before we actually speak about whether Norwich City should make any other signings. I completely forgot about our depth. I won't lie to you. And I think that's a result of sort of the injuries throughout the season where we've looked quite thin. I know we're it's not a crisis at the moment, but we've got a couple of positive COVID tests. We've got a couple of players coming back. We've got a couple of players still out from long-term injuries, like Sam Byram, who I completely forgot existed at this point. I don't know if we'll see him this season. We probably won't. But I looked at the squad and we've got so much depth. So Sam, I'm going to throw you in the deep end here. Is there? I'd say let's all try and name one position where we'd like a signing. But do you actually think that Norwich need to make any other signings?
I don't think we need anybody else to get us over the line, promotion wise. But I think when I was trying to think about what I was going to say, I was thinking about last time we got promoted and where we got that wrong. And Webber talked quite a lot about this sort of Premier League tax, where clubs basically bump up their valuations of a player because they know that you're in the Premier League now, which is, you know, the richest league in the world and everything. So I looked at it more from the point of view that, you know, everything's going well right now. But if you really want to make a success of it, you have to start planning early. And I was thinking more about signings we could maybe secure now, maybe send back on loan until the end of the season, or like Buendia, where we could basically get it done and then announce it in the summer. And I think going into the Premier League, my main worry was the fact that Ollie Skip's loan will come to an end.
Yeah.
And I did think we might be able to get him back next season if we get promoted, because I thought that'd be quite a good experience for him. But the way Mourinho talked, I think it was this week, might have been last week, about the possibility of bringing him back. He said not now, but it sounded like he was pretty sure Skip was going to be there next season. And I thought maybe Gustavo Hamer. I think he's at Coventry. He's just signed there, I think, in the summer. But I watched him a little bit when he was at, I think Zwolle is how you say it. His club in the Eerste Divisie, the Dutch second division. And I was really impressed. I thought we could have signed him at that point.
Is he
but
not a number 10?
He looks like, I think it's sort of a box to, more of a box to box. I think from what I've seen of him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think replacing Skip would be my priority. Maybe that was just the first name that came to my mind, I suppose. And I'm not a scout, so maybe there's better options out there.
No, do you know what? You make a really good point. You make a really, really good point in terms of this idea of planning for the future. And as you said, Stuart Webber's addressed this, that perhaps they didn't get it right in the 1920 summer window. Now, we've seen, since Webber's arrived, I'm pretty sure we've seen at least one signing in January, which then came on to join in the summer. Kenny McLean, 17-18. Philip Heister in 18-19. Or no, I suppose he joined in the January, didn't he? But it was the same sort of concept in terms of bedding him in. 1920, Sam McCallum, and Melvin City, a player who I really don't know what the ambition is for him at Norwich City, by the way. And then I definitely think you're right in terms of not replacing, but planning ahead for Ollie Skip. For me, it would be a case of just maybe looking to get Sorensen in centre mid, because I think he'll sort of be the replacement for him. He's not going to be as good, definitely won't be, but equally he could live up to sort of maybe the hype. Fingers crossed. I don't know if I'd make a signing for that, but you make a fantastic point. Alf, signings apart from a goalkeeper, which we'll address at the end.
Well, I was going to say goalkeeper.
Right, that's what I realised. I thought I'd shoot in the foot.
Right, wow, God, you put me on the spot here now. You know what? I think I'm pretty comfortable. It's a really tough one, right? Because
you can say no. You can say no.
The only thing is, and when you say about preparing for the future, there is still a little bit of me of like, look, say for example, we go up to the Prem and Timo Pukki has a dry spell again, or, you know, maybe gets injured. I would like to have a bit more behind him, especially if we're talking about, you know, not trying to make a awful account of ourselves again like we did last time. I'd like to either have a decent backup or a younger player come in. Like you say, buy them, send them back on loan, bring them in. Just something a bit more than Jordan Hugill behind him, I think. But that's put me on the spot, so I have no names. I can't say anyone.
Well, you made a really good point, again, in that I definitely agree that I would like for someone to come in who is a £10 million, £9 million striker who's going to try and lay claim to the number 9 spot for Norwich. That's not going to happen, sadly, because we've signed Jordan Hugill permanently. We've got Adam Eder, who I would very much would have been comfortable with as sort of the bare minimum as a third striker. Maybe if it had a successful season this season, which he still can, there's still time, he would have been my number 2. But as you mentioned, Pukki, he's getting on. we're not going to talk about him like he's an old man, but again, in footballing terms, he's getting on, isn't he? I have no doubt if we were to go up, he could score another 10, 11 goals in the Premier League. Would that be enough to keep Norwich up? I don't know. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. But I do think that Norwich should perhaps look to sign another number 9. Will it happen though? I don't think so. I was really blown away. Again, I was thinking about this yesterday. I was really sort of blown away by this thought of signing Hugo permanently. I don't really get it, to be honest with you. It's just off the cuff. I don't really know. I would, if he was on loan, brilliant signing, because again, he's like the Jordan Rhodes, impacts a few games, helps Norwich hold on to a few wins, but it's a bit of a weird one. So I don't really see that happening. For me personally, I'd like to see maybe another right back, because I don't trust Sam Byram to not get injured again. The guy seems to be made out of wet tissue paper, which is just unfortunate for him, because he seems like quite a decent player. But equally, I don't know if Max Aarons will be here come next season, even if we were to go up. And again, Barley Mumba is a player who has barely played sort of in the Football League, really. So I don't know how much I trust him. So I'd like to see Norwich perhaps sign a right back, whether it's this window where, again, you sign him, send him back on loan, or you just agree a deal for the summer. That's my preference. Now, Alf, I'll let you talk about the goalkeeping situation, which you wanted to do earlier before I decided to put you in a corner.
Well, the only thing I'd say is, and again, let me just clarify, this is for a backup goalie.
Yeah,
and I kind of just want to get both of your guys' thoughts on this, because there's a couple of avenues we can go down, right? I think there's no, we know that publicly it's kind of been indicated that we're looking at getting a backup goalie. The kind of name is Neuland. I can't remember his first name now. It escapes me. The
like
Aston
Thomas
Villa
Nyland.
keeper who managed to save the ball into his net last year and still not give a goal. Which would be a great thing to have in a backup goalkeeper, can I say? I think the thing right now, which I'm trying to consider, is I think, let's be honest, Michael McGovern's not going to play another game for Norwich City at all, because he runs out of contract this summer and his injury is out for like 3 or 4 months, which means he's probably, even if he was fit, you'd have to have an injury to Tim Krul or Daniel Bard, who's probably, in all honesty, overtaking him in the pecking order right now. It really comes down to whether or not you sign a backup to go up with and then loan out Daniel Barden, further his progression, because you don't want to have him sitting there as a number 2. It's just such a waste, especially at 20 years old with what he's shown. You want to get him out, even if, League One, League Two, Championship, just build up that kind of portfolio he can have of experience. Or do you re-sign someone like Michael McGovern after his injury, because you know what he's getting? It's already been publicly noted before his last contract, which was last year when he got a year's deal, that he has an absolutely unbelievable impact in the changing room. You know what you're getting with him. I think that's the kind of dilemma you've got to come up with, is do you go in for someone like a Neuland, who's probably a better goalkeeper, or do you go for someone for more of a morale boost who, if needed, isn't ideal, but you just got to hope that Tim Krul doesn't get injured?
I'll let you go, Sam.
I think I wouldn't mind Nyland. I think that famous moment has definitely hindered him, and I feel a bit sorry for him with that. But I think Championship level, he's definitely good enough to be a second choice from what I've seen of him at Villa towards the end of last season. I think the suggestion was that he wanted to be playing as a first choice from sort of the start of next season, so it would only be short term. So again, they would need to start planning for if we got promoted, or even if we didn't get promoted, they'd probably need to bring in another goalkeeper. But I think Dan Barden has really shown that he can be trusted. Maybe not all the time, but he can be trusted if we're desperate. And I will feel sorry for him if we decide to bring in 1 or 2 more goalkeepers, because I think, what's the point in our philosophy of bringing in young players and giving them a chance if they play well and then we go, oh well, you're a young player, so we're going to have to bring in somebody anyway. That didn't apply when Max Aarons came in and played really well. We didn't go and buy another right back because Ivo Pinto was always injured.
We had Paslak as well, didn't we?
Yeah, exactly. And he kept Paslak out of the team. So
who's now playing for Dortmund? Sorry, I just want to mention that.
There you go. So just because it's a goalkeeper doesn't mean that the situation can't change because of how they played, and I think Barden has probably earned the opportunity to be at least third choice first team goalkeeper. But with Aston Oxborough coming back in, who everybody seems to have forgotten about because he's got this season long injury, but He was supposed to be going on loan to League Two, I think. So he's probably ready to play some sort of role. So it'll just be interesting, I think, in terms of the young goalkeepers in the club, who they trust and who they want to go with. And I think that will determine whether they need to sign another goalkeeper and the quality of that player.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with both you guys. I've got nothing to say on it apart from if Nyland wants to join for 6 months, I'm totally fine with that because, again, we've not really got to rely on him that much because once Krul's back, I don't think he'll, well, fingers crossed, he won't get injured again. And again, the guy, Tim Krul, is just absolutely sublime. So I often don't think about goalkeepers. I agree, hopefully Dan Barden can go out on loan at a higher level than Bury Town and pick up some experience because, do you know what, I'm not criticising that level of football because as a goalkeeper specifically, experience is such an important thing. Playing week in, week out is such an important thing, especially at such a young age, where typically you expect goalkeepers to come onto the scene around 23, 24. Daniel Barden is 20 years old, just turned 20 years old. So he's got plenty of time. And he's proving already that he's quite decent. So definitely, I think he'll be Norwich's future number one, which is really exciting. But if Nyland wants to join for 6 months and then go off somewhere, that's fine. I don't want to have a situation where we need to put an outfield player in goal. As long as we don't have that, I'm totally fine. Because McGovern, again, has proved, well, we won't really see him this season, will we? But he's proved that he's actually all right. He's not actually that bad. He's made some absolute corkers of saves, of which I think a couple will be put up there for save of the season. But I think in terms of transfers, etc., we'll move on now to Bristol City. Now, to give you a bit of context, last time Norwich City played Bristol City, which we all remember very, very well, and we often reference when we talk about Norwich at their best, they were brilliant. They beat them 3-1. I remember I was on a coach on the way to Derbyshire to watch Dereham get stuffed 5-0. So to watch Norwich win 3-1 in that fashion was a really good way to start my day. And as I said, we always, I personally always reference that performance when you think of Norwich at their best, especially in the first half. The second half, not so much. Emi Buendia scored a really, really good goal, didn't he? Do we think, I'll turn to you first, Alfie, for this. Do you think that, much like Cardiff and the lessons they learned from Norwich, do you think Bristol City will be looking at that previous meeting and thinking, right, we've got to set up to be solid here against Norwich? Or do you think it'll be a case of let's go and take the game to them?
The fact that we're at home makes me think that as a track record of every other team, they'll probably look to sit in and hit us on the counter like most sides. Because, thinking of the teams that's worked for your Coventries, etc., your QPRs, and the few that has, that kind of is a recipe for a chance of success. I want to say that Bristol City were actually really good and competitive when we played them last time. And the scoreline did kind of flatter us, in my opinion, in terms of we just showed that we had the level of quality we had in terms of players like Emi Buendia and Timo Pukki, who were just relentless finishers. And that was really what got us to the line. I think what's also worth noting is in that first game, they got hit with 2 or 3 injuries and players that were missing, specifically defensively, Alfie Mawson, who is a fantastic defender. I think from when he was back at Swansea when they went up, again, we'll probably talk about it a little bit more later on, but, there was a lot going for us going into that encounter. I think it'll be a lot closer, and I think that, hey, if you're a betting man, 2-1 is the no-brainer of a bet for Norwich to win. But I think it's going to be a much closer contest than the original time.
It was a really good performance, wasn't it? And as you said, I keep saying that. It was a really good first half, but the second half was very familiar for Norwich, wasn't it? In that we didn't really sit off, I don't think, but Bristol City could have been well in the game, couldn't they? I think they missed a penalty, which would have made it 3-2 in a really important minute of the game, which was about the 80th. I remember Naki Wells, he tried to chip it, didn't he? Which was just it was fairly embarrassing for him. Sam, what are you expecting from Bristol City, and are you worried at all?
I think maybe I am a little bit, to be honest. I think it will be a different game to what it was in was it October maybe or November, around that sort of time.
October.
Because I think, like you said, they'll be more wary of what Norwich can do, and that Buendia goal is not going to happen again. As much of a great player is. I think actually a similar thing happened. It was almost exactly the same. Yesterday was Gibson played a long ball over the top towards Buendia, and I was just thinking anybody in that position, no matter what sort of level of football you've played at, would be thinking, oh, Bristol City, Bristol City, Bristol City, when they're seeing that ball come over the top in similar fashion, and it didn't come off again. So, I think without that moment of individual brilliance, it would have been hard for us to see out the game, to be honest. And I think Bristol's pitch is quite a lot bigger, and that suited us on the day. Which sounds weird because we obviously like to play the sort of short passing and triangles and things, but I think there was quite a lot of, it was still on the floor, and it was still precise passes, but like Gibson's pass to Buendia went long and into space. Same with, I think Sorensen found Pukki with a pass that was maybe 25 yards from sort of the halfway line into the box. And I don't think that space really exists at Carrow Road, which is quite a small pitch. And I think Bristol will be better, and they will have been warned by what happened last time. So I think they'll be more resolute, and they'll be more of a task for us to deal with. But I would never write Norwich off, and I would never not have them as favourites for a game. So I still think we should be winning, especially at home. But given their league position, I'm a little bit worried, and they're definitely a good side, because you see in this league quite often teams go on runs and it's about momentum, but they've had momentum and then they've lost it and then they've gone back again. So that shows that they do have actually a good team, and it wasn't just them riding a wave. So I suppose I'm a little bit worried, but not. I still expect us to win.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm looking at them here in the table. They're 9th, 23 games played, 36 points. They're only 4 points or 3 points, off the playoffs, which suggests that they're having maybe an above average season is probably how I'll describe it. And we know, as Norwich fans, you look at the 18-19 season, they've caused us trouble before, haven't they? We just about beat them at home. We were not lucky. We fought for a well-earned point, I'll say, at Ashton Gate. Now, I know they're under different management, and I think this style of football is meant to be a bit more exotic. But Alfie, I want you to walk us through their recent form and sort of how you think that'll impact their performance.
You know what? It's really interesting. I think it paints the picture of, and you kind of hit it on the head, Sam, in terms of they're almost like their inconsistency. Where they kind of go in and out of form. I mean, their away record, because really that's what we kind of got a focus on. Is 5 wins, 1 draw, 5 losses. So that kind of correlates to win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. With obviously the exception to the draw. And then their last 6 in terms of just all competitions. Championship games, but home or away, it's 3 wins, 3 losses. So again, very much follows the kind of formula of just inconsistency. I think what is really important is that their last away win was the 1st of December against Q. So they haven't won away from home in at least, I think, their last 3 or 4 attempts, which obviously is a positive for us. And in terms of their ability to score, they haven't scored 3 goals at all. I'm pretty certain. I went through their games a couple of times. It's almost like another doppelganger of Norwich here. They haven't scored 3 goals at all this season in a championship game, which is crazy because I know Norwich have only done it once against them, but it just shows that they're not a very free scoring team. I think defensively they're going to be an absolute force. So I don't know if I want to move on too fast, but I literally have a stat which really made me kind of shocked in a way.
Please tell us about Callis and Mawson. Do that.
The interesting thing is that when they play together, which they haven't been able to that often, but even individually, the craziest stat from those two is that this season, both of them haven't had a single error leading to a shot or a goal. So not one time has either of those had an error which leads to a direct shot. And I think that's the crazy thing. Obviously, Callis met his match in Buendia from a 40-yard ping where he touched it down. And, that obviously wasn't counted as an error. Who knows? Interesting. But as a defensive unit, those two, I think you're going to notice the quality they have. I think Callis come through the ranks of Chelsea, and kind of never really hit it. He had loan spells out at Fulham and Bristol before they signed him permanently, and Mawson again, kind of injury stricken. I think he went out to Burnley, Premier League team like that, before he kind of dropped back down. Yeah, I think he went from Swansea to Burnley or another Premier League team. Fulham, was it Fulham? And he never really worked out. But he's back in the Championship with Bristol, and in the small sample size he's played, which is only 6 games, because he was hit by injury the game before he played us before, he's been absolutely fantastic.
Okay, that's fair enough. I can see how excited you were from how red your face is getting talking about Callis and Alfie Mawson.
I love him.
But you know what? They're 2 very good players. Let's not get that wrong at all. They're Championship veterans, and I know they're not actually that old between them, but when you're in the Championship and you know the Championship as well as Norwich City do, you recognise those names. Callis, for example, playing against us in the Championship playoff final. Alfie Mawson, again, is a player who has been promoted before. As you said, went to Fulham. I think he earned like an £18 million move,
Yeah.
but injury struck. And it seems to have, again, I remember I made a video on him when there were rumours circulating that there was interest from Norwich. A lot of Norwich fans were excited by it. Obviously, Norwich went on to sign Ben Gibson, who, by the way, has been absolutely brilliant. We can make a video on him another day, but he's been absolutely sublime. These two names in front of me, very, very good players. However, I know that the Norwich attack have what it takes, not just from the previous example of it, but from their overall quality. I know they have what it takes to score goals past them. Now, it's very interesting you mentioned the not being able to put games to bed, as well as not being able to really score 3 goals, of which I think twice Norwich have done that this season against Stoke and against these, of course. Sam, what have Norwich got to do to start scoring more goals? It's a very tough question, but also an obvious one. But just how?
I think it's just one of them ones where it'll fall into place one time and then it'll probably happen 3 or 4 times in a row. You know, you see it all the time with, maybe not with teams, but with strikers. They have, you know, 6 or 7 games where they don't score, and then they probably get a double and they just get going again. You know, as long as Norwich are winning, it's not a problem. But obviously we're all, you know, I think we're all excited to be able to just sit back and watch them destroy a team at some point. But yeah, I think that'll just happen. I don't think they really need to worry. It's not, you know, we are consistently scoring. It's not like, you know, we're winning 1-0, 1-0, 0-0, 1-0. You know, it's you know, it's still 2 goals every game, or I don't know the exact stats, but I would imagine it's between 1 and 2 goals per game, which is definitely enough to win games when you've got a defence that has been quite strong. You know, up there in the league, in my opinion. Our defence has been so. I think they've just got to wait, really. Probably wait for the injury sort of crisis. It's maybe not a crisis anymore, but the injury problems to calm down a little bit. I think Dow's coming back now, and that Cantwell, Dow, Buendia 3 will eventually gel, and that will probably be the game when we score all those goals. You know, probably be 8 or 9-0. We'll probably catch up, and it will be, you know, probably against Wickham, definitely the worst side I've ever seen Norwich play. So yeah,
I still
look
dominated
forward
us
to
for
that
70
game.
minutes there, didn't they? Christ.
Who hasn't?
Oh yeah.
No, I'm joking.
Do you know what? It's a very, very good point. Now, the last question I've got, which I'll pin to you, Sam, I'm sure you can chip in as well, Alf. How important is this game to Norwich this season? Because Bristol City are a team, as I mentioned, who are on the cusp of the playoffs. Let's not get it wrong. These teams, to me, having seen Norwich get promoted to the Premier League many a time now, I think 3 or 4 times, these teams are the hurdles, they're the highest hurdles, aren't they, in terms of they're not quite good enough to challenge for the title, but equally they've got that quality. For Christ's sake, we've just analysed 2 defenders, which says how decent they must be. How important is it for Norwich to actually win this game, putting perhaps result over performance?
Every game is big when you get to this, when you're at this point in the season, and also in this position in the table. You know, you look at the title race in 2018-19. If Man City would have dropped a single point in those, I think they won 15 games or so in a row to finish the season. If they would have dropped a single point in that period, they would have lost the title, and that shows how big every single game is when you're in the position that Norwich are, especially in the Championship, where the quality of the teams is so condensed and every game is tight and you could lose to any opposition. Every game is big now, and especially against a team that has the quality that Bristol have. It's massive, as I'm sure we'll say before every single game on the podcast. You know, you could ask that every week, and I'm sure we would sit here and say, yeah, this one's massive, because they all are now.
Alf, for you, how important?
I just think it's maintaining that gap. You know, I think we've learned it before, and obviously we're in a position now where 4 points clear of Swansea and maybe 7 points clear of third. Keeping that gap is what's all important. You know, it doesn't matter how it is. It's just we've learned in this league that you can lose a Saturday game, lose a Tuesday game, and that 6 points is taking you from third to seventh. You know, or I think even with Bristol, if they win this, 2 games ago they were about 12th. If they win this one and with their last win, they could go up into 6th. So it just shows you how one or two bad results can just completely throw you off and make you kind of perceive the season completely differently. So I think for us right now, it's just points on the board. As long as you keep to that every week, like 2 points roughly, you'll hit the mark where you get promoted at the end of the season. So look, if we drop points there and then, like a draw, for example, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. It's just, I think, keeping that unbeaten streak, that's the big thing for me.
I think you're absolutely spot on. From my own selfish perspective, I said this before the Cardiff game. I want to see Norwich stuff someone 5-0. Could that happen? Maybe. Will it happen? Probably not. If it happens, I'll be absolutely delighted, and we'll have a lovely time on the podcast talking about it, won't we? But yeah, I think that's everything for today. Has anyone got any other points to make on anything else we've talked about?
Nothing until I'm all dried out.
I don't think so.
Sorry, all dried. That is absolutely fair enough. If you could leave a like on the video, we'd really appreciate that. To those who listen on iTunes and Spotify, if you could leave a rating, again, we would very, very much appreciate that. If you could hit the subscribe button, of which I've been alerted by my YouTube Studio app that in the past 28 days, 55% or 85% of you, 85% who are watching the videos aren't subscribed, which is kind of sad. But equally, if you could hit the subscribe button, we would be very, very grateful. So until next time, we'll see you again very, very soon.